The inhabitants of Moya just want to go home. The problem is they don't know where they are, and they don't know where home is. Desperate people don't know discretion, and can easily fall victim to crooks and fiends. That's what happens in DNA Mad Scientist. Namtar is the fiend in question, a mad scientist.
A learned scientist as yourself.
Which is better than...
I'm a damn scientist.
Namtar is also allegedly superior to everyone in every way.
Deal? You felt we had a deal? A deal connotes reaching some point of equality. I'm afraid there's never been anything equal about us.
He is physically superior, perhaps, but he is mad, and of highly questionable ethics and motives.
My interest isn't in your ship, but in your ship's pilot.
What do you want with him?
I will require one of your pilot's arms.
We have our mad scientist, so now we need a tavern with villagers terrified by the mad scientist like it's a Hammer horror movie. Ah, perfect. In said tavern, Crichton is pouting.
11 million species. 11 million? And he couldn't at least narrow it down for me? I mean, sure, he can't pinpoint the exact location, but am I even in the neighborhood here?
Aeryn is pouting with him, and they are so absorbed in their pity party that they miss the desperate evil unfolding on Moya.
What do you think you're doing?
Please, I implore you, just listen.
To what? How dare you?
Namtar has offered us something that we cannot obtain anywhere else.
Think about somebody else for a change.
No, I don't go.
Definitely the lowest moment for Zan, Dargo, and Rigel in the whole series. After their crime against Pilot, we get our first insight into Pilot's character and history.
How can you not be angry? Insanely angry.
When one of my species is bonded to a Leviathan, we give our lives to the service of others. Ship first, then those who travel aboard her.
Pilot's resignation in no way exonerates the actions of Zan, Dargo, and Rigel. Even Aeryn is disgusted with their action, and she shows compassion and ethical concern for the first time. Piercing Aeryn's emotional armor is the real subject of this episode. Yes, Zan, Dargo, and Rigel squabble over who gets to go home first, a hope later exposed to be pure folly.
What have you done?
It would have destroyed all of Moya's data. It was never meant to work.
They were deceived by Namtar, and more importantly, so was Aeryn.
I wish to participate in your research.
What made you change your mind, my dear?
I know that there are other Sebacean colonies beyond the known territory. I want you to find me one where I can
Fit in? Then we will look for it together.
A bad decision worthy of a Hammer horror movie. Predictably, asking for help from a mad scientist leads to horrible consequences.
There is clearly something wrong. May I ask what?
It's the DRDs. But it's not just the DRDs, it's the ship's power generator, the hydraulic fluids.
You hear all that?
Not so much hear it as sense it.
But how?
It's Namtar. He took some of Pilot's DNA, and he...
Dr. Frankenstein has nothing on Namtar. His dastardly plan is revealed to us by Cornata.
I've got to help her. You've got to help me help her.
Namtar needs your friend too badly. He wants to isolate your pilot's multitasking capability through Aeryn. He'll do anything to get it.
Why? Why does he need it so damn bad?
Because it's an ability he doesn't possess yet.
That's a classic mad scientist scheme there, but Farscape adds a twist on the classic formula.
You're saying he grafts the genetic traits of other species onto himself? That's what he set up this lab to do?
He didn't set up this lab.
You did.
I was the project leader. These were my research team.
Namtar started to use your discoveries on himself.
I increased his intellect, at least at first. Then when he became smart enough, he began doing it on his own. He was a test subject. He was one of my laboratory creatures. He drew genetic material from all the species I had cataloged. He increased his physical size. He gave himself the best traits of life forms from 1,000 different worlds.
Now he's using Aeryn as his own lab rat.
He used us all.
The monster Cornata created has run amok. Did she also genetically enhance his megalomania?
John,
How can you do this to her?
Is that how you speak to someone who is fast approaching perfection?
Yes, Aeryn is Namtar's next victim. I mentioned in the previous deep dive recap of That Old Black Magic that Farscape is beginning to explore the nature of evil. Maldus wasn't real evil, but Namtar is pure, cold evil, having a complete disregard for how one's actions affect others.
is it necessary to reduce me fully to the final stage? As soon as my body reaches a saturation point, you will take the DNA features you desire and discard the rest.
I look forward to experiencing the insight you obviously already possess.
Farscape early on sets the pattern that Crichton saves the day. And sure enough, he does, with Cornata's significant help. Crichton saved Aeryn, while Zan, Dargo, and Rigel acted like spoiled children. The side plot of their arguments over the map is far less interesting than the central story of Aeryn's existential predicament. Aeryn's life is clearly in danger, but more important for Farscape's grand story arc is that Namtar's evil exploitation of her reveals to her and us hitherto unknown depths of who she is. What we learn in this episode. Let's settle the minor ones first. Humans are not in Namtar's database of 11 million species, which indicates that Earth is well outside of known space. Pilot's multitasking capabilities may be unique to his species, as Namtar has not been able to locate them elsewhere in spite of his large database. Pilot's species has rapid healing and regenerative capabilities. Pilot species commonly bond themselves to leviathans to give their lives to the service of others, as we saw. But what we learn most vividly in this episode is what Aeryn learns about herself. She sees her actual self for the first time, and the revelation has an enormous influence on her going forward. The feeling of compassion she claims to hate in Premiere wells up as her shipmates ruthlessly cut off Pilot's arm in exchange for an alleged star map. How could you? Pilot is defenseless, she says to them. Compassion? From a peacekeeper? Dargo mocks. But yes, Aeryn has been pushed to a compassion she didn't realize she had. Zan, Dargo, and Rigel are complicit in the mutilation of Pilot, but Crichton is not, and their shared moral position draws them closer. At the idea that everyone else will be going home if Namtar's maps are accurate, Aeryn is forced to face her greatest fear again, one she never realized she had.
I was born a peacekeeper soldier. I've always been one among many. Member of a division, a platoon, a unit, a team. I've never been on my own, John. Never been alone. Ever.
Separation and solitude unnerve her, but she realizes that is a path that she must take. Having been deviously injected with Pilot's DNA by Namtar, Aeryn is forced on a path no one else has taken, becoming a hybrid Sebacean pilot. Namtar took advantage of Aeryn's fear of being alone. Originally uninterested in his experiments that located planets by DNA, she went back to him because, as she tells Crichton,
I wanted him to find me a place where I could belong. I didn't want to get left behind. I'm so scared.
Her admission of fear to Crichton, unimaginable in previous episodes, expresses the immediate fear of the dis-ease changing her body, and her existential fear of being separated and alone. Crichton is her only connection, tenuous though it is. The genetic mutation Namtar inflicts on her is not just a brush with physical death, but a brush with the death of herself, as she feels her conscious identity slip away from her. Crichton, of course, saves her, but the experience gives her a new way to view herself.
I've always thought of myself in terms of survival. Life and death. Keeping the body alive. But what Namtar did to me... It was me. Inside. The real me.
What she learns in her near self-death experience is how to look inward to herself, not just outward to how her environment defines her. And that's very significant for the rest of Farscape. Ponderables. The biggest difficulty with this episode is the basic premise of Xandargo and Rigel wanting to go home. Even without yet knowing what we learn in later episodes, it was obvious in this episode that going home would not be a desire for Xan and Dargo. Rigel wants to go home to Hyneria, yes, to reclaim his rightful place in the throne. But Xan and Dargo are both exiled, and going back to their home worlds would mean death sentences. These facts are conveniently forgotten in this episode's plot. Certainly, they both wish they could go home, but they would not take up the opportunity to go home as unhesitatingly as this episode portrays. The concept of the genetic map is not very convincing. Namtar knows where their home worlds are and is offering them
the genetic map to your home world. A map that will allow you to make the journey and avoid any peacekeeper jurisdictions along the way. That is what you came here for, isn't it?
But Namtar doesn't need to collect DNA samples from them to map out a route to their home worlds. DNA doesn't add anything to knowing where they are, where peacekeepers are, or how to get to their homes. The genetic map is a weak plot element. Namtar says he has 11 million species in his database. He does not specify if that is the number of species of animals, sentient beings, or what exactly. That seems like a big number, but scientists estimate that there are somewhere between 6 to 8 million species alive on Earth today. So 11 million is not a high number of species in general. If Namtar's database is of sentient species, as the episode seems to imply, then we are talking about millions of worlds, and that is an amazing accomplishment. We could quibble with how quickly Namtar reverted to his original form, and we could say that Aeryn recovering physically as though nothing had happened is a Star Trek ending. But Aeryn has been mentally and existentially altered forevermore, and that is not Star Trek. That's Farscape.